Hello and welcome to another episode of Two Guys and a Chainsaw. I'm Todd.
And I'm Craig.
Well, today, as we often do on our podcast, we're going to memorialize another famous actor who has passed away, who's at least dabbled in the horror genre. Just, a couple weeks ago, I guess, Rutger Hauer passed away at the ripe old age of 75 from an unspecified illness. But he lived a good life, it seems like. Most people probably know him most famously from Blade Runner.
Right.
He played the villain in Blade Runner and did a fantastic job with that. He turned down the lead role in Das Boot in order to play this. So clearly he made a better choice there. Das Boot's a good movie, but I don't think anybody in there was quite rocketed to stardom as they were from Blade Runner. So Blade Runner is one of my favorite movies, and he's fantastic in it. And, he's always had this look. He played a lot of evil characters, and he didn't want to get typecast. So at some point, he really started turning down those roles and branching out. But gosh darn it, he makes a pretty good villain. He does. Kind of looks the part, right? He's Dutch, and especially in his younger years, actually even into his older years, he's a pretty good-looking dude.
He's a handsome guy, yeah.
Yeah, really cool, very well respected, but also apparently a pacifist. I mean, actors are actors, but a fun bit of trivia, he actually grew up in Germany during the occupation, and so he said that he was a pacifist and was very active in his life with these causes like AIDS awareness, Greenpeace, a very noble thing. So anyway, we are memorializing his passing today by doing The Hitcher. Now, I don't know. I remembered this movie a little differently than it turned out. The Hitcher always seemed to be available in the horror section, and it always, in some way, was billed as a horror movie. And then when I watched it the first time, I was actually in college. My college roommates said, "Oh man, have you never seen The Hitcher? You've got to watch this movie." And so we turned it on and we put it in. And I remembered certain scenes from this film. And I remembered it being really creepy and really scary, sort of not slasher movie, but kind of killer hunter type slasher movie. But watching it again this time around, I don't know, Craig, would you consider this horror, really?
I don't know. When you suggested that we do it, I looked it up because I don't think I'd ever seen it. In fact, I'm pretty sure. IMDb lists it as a thriller. And I think that's fair, but yeah, I think that I would consider it a horror movie. It's definitely scary, and he plays a really wicked, villainous guy in this movie. So I would consider it horror. In fact, Entertainment Weekly ranked it at some point as the 19th scariest movie of all time. And
really?
Yeah, I don't know. I agree. I mean, to consider finding oneself in the position that C. Thomas Howell finds himself in this movie would certainly be nightmarish.
That's true.
And scary. So yeah, I would consider it horror. It's maybe a little bit different from our usual fare, but it's a frightening movie, and you're right. Rutger Hauer does make a good villain. And I think that part of that, I don't know. Like you said, he's a handsome guy. He has these really strikingly beautiful, in my opinion, piercing blue eyes.
Oh yeah, for sure.
He's a dapper fellow. He's a good-looking guy, but he just has this kind of menacing presence, and yeah, I mean, he scared me in this movie.
Well, and the movie, as it was originally written, apparently, was even much more horrific. It got toned down quite a bit in the pre-production process. The writer of this film, Eric Red, who also, by the way, wrote Near Dark after this. And this has a clear Near Dark vibe to it.
Yep.
But he was like 20 years old, and he made a short film and was trying to get funding for it. Couldn't get funding for a bigger movie, so he ended up, driving cross country. And during that time, he came up with this idea for this movie about a killer hitchhiker. And so he wrote the script and shopped it around. It ended up in the producer's hands. And the producers who eventually produced this movie just went back and forth on it. They just felt it was extremely brutal. It was extremely violent and very mean-spirited in its original incarnation. They spent quite a bit of time in pre-production and then wrestling with the studio even up into the time they started shooting, what kinds of things they would leave in and what things they would leave out. as it turns out, I would say the movie, even though it's scary and there's horrifying things that happen in here, it's certainly not as gory or as brutal as a lot of things we've seen. But it has this way of kind of getting under your skin a little bit just by not showing everything. I think it's a movie that does that well, don't you think?
Yeah, I do, and I read those things too. In fact, some major studios like New Line and some other studios turned the film down, and they had a difficult time getting studio backing from it, and eventually they did.
It's hard to imagine a studio like New Line turning something like this down, isn't it?
I know, right? And, from what I've read, ultimately, the filmmakers kind of had to pull their punches a little bit. They had some really gruesome and really dark things planned initially, and they had to pull back on that a little bit. Ultimately, I would say it doesn't make a huge difference. I mean, you get the idea of exactly how brutal this guy is. I also read that it's meant to kind of, in some ways, be an allegory, and Rutger Hauer's character, John Ryder, is kind of just supposed to be like kind of this epitome of evil. Like, he's supposed to represent evil.
Yeah.
If I had one complaint about the movie, and really, I was entertained and I enjoyed it, and maybe this is intentional, I don't know, but the thing that kind of bothered me was I never really understood what this villain's motivation was.
Yes, exactly. Mm-hmm.
Like, why is he fucking... Oh, excuse me. Go ahead and bleep me out. Why is he messing with this one guy so much? Ultimately to his demise. Like, I kind of didn't get that. And maybe that's something that was kind of lost in translation after all of these changes they had to make. I'm not sure. It certainly is frightening, and he certainly is, a very real and ominous threat, but I just kind of didn't get it. Like,
yeah.
Why this guy? And he really, really goes out of his way to mess with this guy.
Yeah. By the end of it, you get this feeling that he basically had a death wish. Like, he expected to end... I mean, he gets it in the end, all right? He gets it in the end.
Right.
It's not one of those movies where he gets away and it's super bleak. I mean, it turns out a little bleak, but you get this feeling from the beginning. I mean, so what happens is this guy, this kid, played by... His name is Jim, and he's played, like you said, by the boy from E.T. The older brother.
One of the boys from E.T.
The older brother.
Not the main kid.
No, of course not. The older brother.
No, not the older brother. He's one of his friends, I think, right? I don't know.
He?
C. Thomas Howell, yeah.
Oh.
C. Thomas Howell was really big in the 80s.
Yeah.
And he had, this kind of, I don't know, nice boy next door look about him. I mean, he's probably most famous from The Outsiders. He was the lead in that, but he was in lots and lots of movies, and he's still working,
like a ton. He's never let up. It's insane. This guy. He's got like 5 or 6 different projects every year since he started. It's nuts.
Oh yeah. But he's this really kind of nice, sweet boy next door kind of guy, and it's kind of funny to see him in this movie because I feel like they kind of try to, I don't know, in the beginning, like he's smoking cigarettes, like they kind of try to portray him as being kind of this rebel,
kind of a pretty boy
road.
way.
Yeah. But anyway, so in the very beginning, he's driving along, and he keeps falling asleep at the wheel, which in itself is nightmarish. I've actually done that. It's really scary.
Yeah, me too.
In order to, try to keep himself awake, he sees this hitchhiker, and he picks him up, and it's Rutger Hauer, and Rutger Hauer is very ominous and threatening kind of from the very beginning. And, like, right away from the very beginning, Rutger Hauer's basically like...
What's so funny?
That's what the other guy said.
Who's the other guy?
The guy who was driving that car back there. The guy who picked me up before you did.
Was that him in the car?
Yeah, I'm sure it was. Couldn't have walked very far.
Why is that?
Because I cut off his legs. And his arms. And his head. And I'm gonna do the same to you.
It's immediate. And, like, he, like, you know, has a switchblade and, like, you know, holds it up to him and stuff. And C. Thomas Howell, Jim, somehow he realizes that the door ajar light is still on the passenger side, so he kicks him out of the car, and one would think that that would kind of be the end of it, but no. The hitchhiker then continues to, you know, follow and pursue and torment him for the next hour and 35 minutes.
Yeah. It's so funny.
And that's what the whole movie is about.
It just lays its cards on the table, not even 10 minutes into the movie, and then the rest of it, you're thinking, how much longer can this stretch out? Like, it gets a little improbable after a while. He's
always there.
It's supernatural, and it's like, not only is he always there, but it's like he's lying in wait. He knows that this kid is going to stop at this gas station, so that as the kid gets out and explores the gas station, he's behind a truck inside the garage, ready to just burst out and surprise him. You know, I mean, it's one of those kind of deals. So that one aspect of the movie really, all right, we've seen a lot of improbable stuff. I'm not against improbable movies, right? It just makes it fun. But the improbability of it for so long, if you compare this against a movie like Duel, the Steven Spielberg movie, which this shares a lot of similarity with, the Steven Spielberg movie is much more probable, you know, even though that villain is also a little more supernatural. Something
it's like an evil truck, right?
Well,
or something like that.
Yeah, it's like you never see the guy's face who's driving the truck, so it's skillful in that way that it does feel like the truck itself is evil, or the guy in it is a little more supernatural. But somehow the situations in that just seem a little more realistic. And this, like I said, it's like, boom, I'm here. Boom, I'm there. You didn't think I'd be here, but I'm here too. You know, and then I came in and I slashed up all the cops while you were in the jail cell, you know, and you didn't hear it.
And framed you for it. Yeah, I know. Like, I know. And he keeps, oh my gosh, it's so funny. Like, I kept, like, yelling at the screen, like, get off this road.
Right.
Like, turn. Like, if you stay on the same highway the whole time, he's just going to keep messing with you.
Well, to be fair, when you're driving across like Arizona and basically most of the western side of the United States, there aren't many options.
Oh, I know, but then that was something else that I kept thinking too, like, I don't know, like, first, he's supposedly what he's doing is like delivering a car. Like, he's from Chicago and he wants to get to California, and he's been waiting for an opportunity to like deliver a car to California just so he can
move there,
get there, which is fine, whatever. But then once he picks the Hitcher up and this guy, you know, like, he just keeps coming across things. Like, after he kicks the guy out, the next thing he sees is like this station wagon with this all-American family in it with like the kids playing in the back, and then the hitchhiker pops up in the back and is like, you know, teasing him, like messing with the kids and stuff, and eventually he finds that car, and we don't see what he sees, but, you know, apparently the whole family has been slaughtered, and it makes him barf and stuff. But at some point, he ends up without his car, and he ends up, like, walking through the desert, and, like, it seems like every few blocks he just finds some oasis in the middle of the desert.
Super lucky.
Like,
there could be nothing for like 100 miles, but when he needs to find something, when his car is crashed, he can just walk to a motel or an abandoned gas station
or whatever. Right. So it's a little improbable, but in that way, it almost, here I'm going to go getting all meta. It almost feels like a dream.
Oh, I was just going to say that. Yes.
Yeah. Every time, you know, he'll have an encounter with the hitchhiker, and the guy will be very menacing, and like that's really all he does is like menaces him mostly, and that's like, and he's killing all these other people along the way. But then anytime they actually encounter each other, like he just shows up. Like the kid will like stop at a restaurant or something, and he'll just be sitting there, and he closes his eyes, and Rutger Hauer just comes and sits down across the booth from him.
Right.
Just calmly, like, hey, I'm here again. I'm going to pop your eye out with my switchblade, but really calmly. Like, I don't know. It's kind of bizarre. It feels very dreamlike.
Wouldn't it be funny? I mean, this movie could have ended like this kid was imagining this guy the whole time, right? Or like he was really the killer and this guy was just, something he was imposing upon the world to try to, it was his alternate personality or something like that. But it clearly doesn't end that. I mean, I guess you might be able to look at it that way, but it clearly doesn't end that way. Well, there's a weird moment. All right, there are a lot of weird moments in this movie, but there's a weird moment in the middle, and let's just jump around. So Jennifer Jason Leigh is in this. She's pretty young. She's pretty good.
Oh my God, she's a baby.
Yeah.
She's so cute.
She is. And she plays a waitress at a diner, the only person apparently who works at this diner, who gets dropped off at her diner every day by a bus. That's how remote this diner is that he also manages to stumble into. This is maybe the third time he's gotten away from this guy, and he's been looking for a phone that he can call, which is also quite quaint. Looking for a phone that he can call from, and he finds it in this diner. So he manages to call the police, and they say, stay where you are. And then he strikes up a conversation with this woman who feels bad for him and makes him a cheeseburger, and they have their little talk and their little dialogue. As he's eating this cheeseburger and these fries, she wanders away, and there's this kind of interesting scene where she goes in the back into the kitchen, and she doesn't come out for a while, but there are noises back there, and it just slowly kind of dollies in on his face while he's absently eating this cheeseburger. I liked this scene a lot because in the back of my head, I'm thinking, oh crap, is that dude here too? And is she getting it in the back? And is this kid slowly starting to realize that might be what's happening? And is that what's going through his head? And then just when you need to, you suddenly realize he's holding a finger. A severed finger in his hand that has somehow made its way into the fries. And he bites the finger and he looks at it and he screams and he runs in the back. He's here too. And at that moment, the police come. And as he runs out of the place, the police hold up their guns and tell him, get down on the ground. And they think that he's the killer. Now, this scene is kind of bizarre. I liked it up to that point. That there's just this tension here. Like, this guy's popped up like 4 or 5 times. He's going to pop up here, and you're just waiting for it to happen. But he doesn't tell this woman anything about really what's going on. He's really quiet about it, which doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. You would think that he'd be like, barricade the doors, lock up everything. There's this killer on the loose, and that's why I'm calling the cops. Then he kind of lets her go away, and I don't understand how a severed finger ended up in the fries.
Well, I don't either. And there are so many moments like that. Like, okay, so there's that one where the severed finger just... I guess the implication is that this guy is just always one step ahead of him and he's just messing with him, but it doesn't really make any kind of logical sense.
No.
I mean, the image of him picking up a severed finger and nearly popping it in his mouth. I mean, that it's great. It's a great image. It's really unsettling. But how did it get there? And then there's another point. I don't even remember how it happened. Like, I think it was the first time that he got arrested and he was in jail, and then he took a nap in jail and had a nightmare about the hitchhiker, and then he woke up and his cell was open and he walks out into the jail and he just sees this German Shepherd police dog, I guess, that's just kind of walking around or whatever. And then he turns a corner and the dog is there, and as he continues around the corner he sees the dog licking the slit throat of one of the cops, and all the cops are dead. And then he runs away, but not before he grabs one of the cops' guns. So then he has a gun. But then he ends up in another restaurant or a bus stop or something. I don't remember. Rutger Hauer shows up and sits right across from him. Jim has the gun pointed at him under the table. John, the bad guy, says,
The gun is empty.
Yeah? Yeah?
Yeah. You never checked it, did you?
So help me, I'll blow you in half.
All right. Squeeze the trigger.
I will.
Please.
Oh, I will.
Because you can sure as shit bet I'm gonna squeeze mine.
And we see that he doesn't even really have a gun. He just is making a finger gun under the under the table, and he just goes like bang, 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 and Jim freaks out and starts pulling the trigger, and it's totally empty. And Rutger Hauer is like, see, I told you didn't even check the gun. And then he hands him a handkerchief, and when Jim opens it up, all the bullets are in there. So we're supposed to believe that Rutger Hauer came into this police station, killed all the cops, knew exactly what gun the kid would take, emptied all the bullets out of it just to set up this scene for later.
Yeah.
Like, what?
Yeah. And it also during this scene, this diner's got people in it. I mean, I think there were people in it. There's certainly somebody around serving him. But, you know, they can calmly have this conversation. It must have been 12 feet away from the guy behind the counter wiping things down. Clearly, this intimidating sequence. And then he grabs his head and he pulls him towards him, which the kid lets him do. And then he licks 2 coins and sticks them on his eyes. I don't know if that was supposed to be a reference to the whole thing where you put coins over a dead body's eyes or whatnot.
I guess, right.
Crossing the River Charon or something. And it's just like he just succumbs to this.
Yeah, and then he sits there with his eyes closed with the pennies over it.
Yeah, like what? Where was your... you suddenly gave up now? You know, like there's any number of things you could do here. But anyway, and then at this point, I think he gets on the bus. He hangs out there for a while after Rutger Hauer's character leaves, who's, by the way, his name is Jim Ryder, which I thought was hilarious.
John Ryder.
Ryder, which I thought was hilarious. And then he ends up getting on a bus that pulls in, and who happens to be on this bus but that woman from earlier from the diner.
Right.
And he pulls her away. Well, he waits for her to go to the bathroom, and then he jumps in the bathroom with her in the back of this small bus and holds the gun to her head and is like, I didn't do it. You believe me, don't you? She's like, I guess. And asks for her help. Okay, I guess it could happen, but it's all very contrived, you know? It just all felt a little too contrived.
It is, and I feel like we're being a little bit over analytical.
Maybe,
it's just a movie. Who cares? But, whatever.
It matters when you're watching it because it kind of takes you out of. At least me, it takes me out of it a little bit if it's too much like this.
It did, and especially like in that restaurant scene that we just described, Jim even says to him, "Why are you doing this to me?" And the guy's like, "Oh, you can figure it out," or something like that. Like, what? No, I can't figure it out. Like, why are you messing with this? I don't know. I don't get it. It's also intricately planned, I guess, or just conveniently it makes it look like Jim is going on this killing spree, killing drivers and tons of cops. Like, there are so many dead cops in this movie.
Dead cops. Those cops are really ineffective and don't help each other out too well, apparently.
No, I know. And God, I don't know. And like, he met this chick once in a restaurant, and then the cops came to arrest him and he was gone, and then he bumped into her again on the bus, and he's like, "It's not me, I swear, you have to believe me." And she's like, "Okay."
I guess.
And then the cops pull over the bus, and he's all ready to surrender. Like, he does this several times. Like, he tries to give himself up several times. At this point, apparently Nash, the waitress, also had a huge revolver on her.
Yeah, that was surprising.
What? Like a giant cop gun?
like a 45.
Where did that come from?
It's massive, yes. I think everybody must have them out here, It's just, maybe that's
I guess, like, I don't know. If you live in the California desert, you better be packing, I guess.
Wild American West still lives on.
Right. And it's like, at this point, like, the dirty... I guess they're not even dirty cops. Like, they just believe, because, like, there's been a whole slew of dead cops along the way, and so this cop is like, "You killed my friend. I'm gonna shoot you." And Nash pops out. She's like, "I saw what you were gonna do."
Earl or whatever. Because she knows them.
Yeah, she knows them. And so then they run off together, and then there's Nash and Jim Jim run off together in a cop car.
Yeah.
Like, they steal the cop car.
It's so crazy.
And then there's a huge chase where, like, first the cop cars are shooting them, and then, fortunately, the hitchhiker just runs up parallel to them in his truck and takes out the cops.
Shoots the two cops straight through the window, which was a shocking scene. Yeah.
Yeah.
But he's there all of a sudden.
How? Like, he's always just right there. And then, like, a helicopter comes and he shoots down the helicopter.
He shoots the helicopter down. My head was between my knees at this point. I just couldn't take that anymore. He aims his handgun at the helicopter, bang, bang, and this helicopter suddenly spins out of control.
And he's just so nonchalant about it. Like, he has no expression on his face. Like, he's just totally deadpan, like, bang, bang, I shot down the helicopter. And, oh, man, I don't even know.
Well, it does kind of make you wonder if the movie's just meant to be just, a dream or just some unreal thing. Well, the score, and this is another reason why it reminded me of Near Dark. Of course, there's the setting. It's kind of a road movie. Near Dark was kind of a road movie. It's set in the 80s.
Yeah.
And it's very similar setting and feel to it. But the score in this movie is very similar to Near Dark's score. It's this very ethereal 80s-ish Never-Ending Story had a score like this. It's the sort of thing that Tangerine Dream used to do, but it's not in this movie anyway. But it also lent a very dreamlike quality to it. And also the fact that this isn't like this sort of thrill ride, every second there's some exciting thing going on kind of action movie. There are long stretches of quiet and of contemplation and of just sitting and thinking and looking and staring and doing and driving and whatnot that, again, Near Dark was very similar in this way. There'd be extreme, graphic, brutal, crazy violence, and then these long scenes of just character talking and stuff. Except in this movie, there aren't many characters. You're not getting to know a gang full of people. You're getting this one kid who's just in a situation, and this guy who seems like Superman, and then a bunch of cops who come and go, and this girl who kind of pops in who barely knows him. We don't really get to know a lot about her.
No, not really.
So it's much more plot driven than it is character driven, and so I don't feel like it really earns its pace. And for me, it dragged a little bit because of it.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I wasn't bored. It's an hour and 37 minutes long. It's not that long, and the action keeps up, but it's all the same. I mean, it's just this guy, stalking this kid, and that's not to say that it's boring, and that's not to say that. It's not fair to say it's all the same. It's not, because there are different set pieces, and like these, when I say, like these car chases and the helicopter and stuff, like these are major action scenes.
Yes.
Yes. And this really isn't, for the type of movie this is, it's not low budget. I think that it filmed on like a $6 million budget or something, and it shows. I mean, things are blowing up all over the place, and major car crashes, and gas stations are exploding, and there's big time stuff going on. But as much as you say it's plot driven, it is, but the plot is so simple.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just this guy tormenting this kid, and that's it. That's the whole movie. Whole movie.
And every scene kind of ends the same. The cops are whatever other outside threat, like, okay, the cops are also after him, but they're dead at the end of every scene that they're in.
Yeah.
The cops end up getting killed, and this guy ends up
they drive
popping
away.
up, and then they drive away. Yeah, and this whole bit where they are in a shootout with the cops, like, they're really getting themselves in some serious hot water here. Like,
I know
their judgment is way off, but it just feels like, come on. He was about to give himself up, and now he's driving down the road shooting at the cops. I don't, and she's doing it too. She's like,
and like,
no, I won't shoot at the cops.
That's the thing too.
And then she's like, okay.
She just met him, like she doesn't even know him. Like they don't have any connection at all.
Yeah.
But all of a sudden she's like, pointing guns at cops to like stick up for this guy that she doesn't even know. Why should she believe him?
Right.
She doesn't have any reason to believe him. C. Thomas Howell, he'll certainly never listen to this podcast, so I feel pretty safe in saying he's kind of a little bitch. C. Thomas Howell, I'm sure he's a lovely fellow, but, he's not like some tough 80s protagonist guy. He's kind of wimpy, really.
Yeah.
And he cries a lot, and, he's calling the cops, I just want to turn myself in. It wasn't me. It was the hitchhiker. And every time he does that, they'll be like, okay. And then the hitchhiker will show up and blow the cops away, and so he's in trouble and has to keep running. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's kind of silly overall.
It really is.
I think the part that surprised me the most was when he's with Nash. They end up, after this huge chase and huge shootout with helicopters and cars exploding, they end up at a motel. And I don't know how, because they don't have any money, but they get a room, and she wants to call her dad, and he says, no, you can't. I don't really know why, but he goes to take a shower, and she secretly calls her dad. And I guess the dad tips off the cops. I don't know, because they show up eventually. But while he's showering, she's laying in bed, and of course, Rutger Hauer is there, just in the room.
Like a vampire. just suddenly he's there. And this is interesting. They very clearly did not have sex, because when they wake up, all their clothes are still on. Or when he, whatever. And it's not a scene, obviously. And he's in the shower. And then Rutger Hauer's character, it's like there's a flash of lightning and he's standing over her. And then there's another flash of lightning and he's laying in bed next to her.
Spooning her.
Her, basically, and he's kind of running his hands over her and whatnot, which is really creepy. And then, of course, the kid comes out, and they're gone. And the door's open, and he realizes she's gone for some reason, and presumably because this guy took her.
Right.
And then, I can't remember, the cops show up at that point, and then they take him to a truck stop, which must have been next door, or maybe this was in the parking lot?
Yeah, I think it's all one. I think it's a truck stop motel kind of deal. But yeah, he runs outside, and the cops are there, and it's all of a sudden they believe him, and they know that, the it's so weird, because basically this hitchhiker guy has set himself up to be caught in this moment.
Yes.
It doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me.
None of this does.
I mean, it's a really interesting setup for a scene, because the kid thinks, as they have for the whole movie, that the cops are going to think it's him, they're going to arrest him, and the cops are like, oh no, we know it wasn't you, but we need your help. And then totally unrealistically, they send him into this scenario. And what has happened is Rutger Hauer has apparently, I guess, disengaged the cab from the bed of a semi-truck, and he has chained up Nash between the cab and the bed, and she's suspended between the two, and it's he's just sitting there with his foot on the brake. If he takes his foot off the brake, I guess it's in drive, it's going to pull forward,
the
and
clutch,
she's going to get she's going to get ripped in half or whatever. So they send Jim in. They're like, oh, you need to go in there and talk him down. What? Why would they? It doesn't even make any sense.
Well, this scenario, it's a cool set piece, and this is one of the few things I remember from this movie as being so horrifying. But I also thought the movie ended here. In my memory, the movie ended here somehow. But no, it's got another half hour to go.
Yeah.
But he goes into the cab, he sits in there, and he has this quick little dialogue with him. But basically, Rutger Hauer's character is pick up the gun, it's on the floorboard.
Tell you what, I'll let you hold the gun on me before I do anything.
They'll catch you.
Yeah, sure. So what?
Once again,
well, and all of a sudden, it seems like this villainous guy is some depressed, what? He's depressed?
He gives that off, doesn't he?
I don't get it. Yeah,
oh, man, so much killing is just
It's really taking it out of me. I just can't go on.
Just the one more, and then you can just shoot me. But he set up an unwinnable scenario. If he shoots him in the head, his foot's going to come off the clutch, and their girl's going to get ripped in half. What he doesn't do is shoot him in the head, and so he just looks at him like, oh, I'm so disappointed in you. You know, you don't have what it takes after all. And he lets his foot off the clutch, and the girl gets ripped in half.
This was the only thing. Now, I read that it was, studio or whoever that decided that they couldn't go there, like they couldn't show it. But that felt so cheap to me.
Yeah.
Because you just see him take his foot off the clutch, and then you see her kind of scream, and you kind of see the tension tighten, kind of in the chains around her wrist. But then it just cuts to black.
Yes.
It opens back up. I don't know, where is he? Like,
the kid's like in a hospital or police station or something.
Yeah, they totally pulled their punch on this one. Like, rip that girl in half. Like, if you're gonna raise the stakes this high, and for me, I don't know, for some reason that set piece seemed really familiar. I don't know if I've read about this or I've just seen the scene or what, but her, being stretched out between these two things and the threat of her being torn in half. I don't know if it's been copied in another movie or what, but that was so familiar to me. But it really surprised me that there wasn't like a Deus Ex Machina, like somehow at the last minute she would be saved. I didn't expect her to get killed, and she does.
Yes.
But the fact that they cut to black and don't show it, and then you're just like, you have to realize, oh, he did it and she's dead.
Yeah.
That made me mad.
It's not. It doesn't really do justice to her character. I mean, it just makes her even more of a throwaway character in a way.
It's funny. The guy that's interrogating, I think, Rutger Hauer, I think he's talking to Rutger Hauer, and of course, he's not giving them. He has no driver's license, and he has no criminal record.
I know. He's
and
the man from nowhere.
I know. He's this big enigma, and they can't figure it out. But the guy who's interrogating him is this little snivelly guy, and I recognized him. I don't know what his name is. I didn't write it down, but he played evil Principal Snyder on Buffy the Vampire Slayer, the series, which, ironically, Rutger Hauer was the main villain in the original Buffy the Vampire Slayer movie with Christy Swanson, which I used to watch all the time when I was a kid. Little trivia there for you. But anyway.
We'll put that on your IMDb page, Craig.
Right? So the cops have him, but he's not talking, and I don't know, there's some weird thing where, like, Jim... They wouldn't put these guys together. It doesn't make any sense.
No.
But for some reason, like,
they do.
They take Jim into the interrogation room, and like he shakes his hand, but then immediately spits in his face. Like, what is this? Like, what kind of drama are you trying to build here? I don't.
And then the cop pulls him away. Well, this was a mistake. Well, yeah, of course it was a mistake. You guys are idiots.
Yeah, you dummy. But Jim very ominously says, "You'll never hold him." They're transporting him in what, like a bus or something? God, I don't even know.
Like
transporting
a van.
the bad guy.
Yeah.
Jim is, with one of the other cops, and he grabs the cop's gun and points it at him and kicks the cop out like he's going all vigilante and he's going to go find this guy and take care of him. I mean, I guess that's basically what happens. Like, we see lots of shots of Rutger Hauer just sitting very calmly in the bus, like looking at things, like, oh, look, I see the cop's gun, and oh, I'm watching them play cards, and like, and then conveniently, just as Jim pulls up on this transport bus or whatever it is, Rutger Hauer, gets the shotgun away from the cops and blows the cops away, and then he like kicks the back door of the transport bus open, and Jim is right behind him, and the police car, and Rutger Hauer dives out of the back of the bus through the windshield of the car. Oh, it's amazing. It's such a cool scene.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous. And the windshield shatters like it's, just like a regular window, like cars don't have safety glass or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, God. But it's fantastic. I mean, just
it's a great
by
bit.
merits of being a really cool scene, like him diving out of the back of this bus and diving through the windshield. And I read that, Rutger Hauer, like, busted one of his own teeth out doing this. He did a lot of his own stunts. He did a lot of the stunt driving, and people were super impressed. Even the stunt guys were super impressed at his abilities in that capacity. And but again, what is the end game here? Like, he dives in there and well, I don't know. Like, then he's all bloody and they kind of fight or something.
That's kind of how it goes. Like, everybody else is suddenly out of the picture, and it's just these two, and there's a truck. The truck that they've had, that Jim, Rutger Hauer's character, has been driving, that he took from somebody earlier in the film. And there's kind of a bit of a standoff out in the middle of nowhere between them, and Jim, who's the kid, gets inside the truck, but he's a little incapacitated. He's down, and Rutger Hauer's facing him with his shotgun, shooting at the truck, slowly walking towards it. It's like this sort of high noon standoff type thing. But then he manages to hit the gas and drives right into him, which would have killed him.
Right.
Would have killed him. He flies back like 20 feet, but then gets up.
Well, at first I thought he was dead, because like they show this, like he's laying there on the ground and you can kind of see him breathing, and then it seems like he stops breathing. So I thought that he was dead. Jim walks up to him and like looks down over him, and I feel like he even maybe points the shotgun at him or like pokes him in the head with the shotgun to see if he's dead.
Yeah.
And it seems like he's dead. And I read that they originally planned on ending the movie with Jim shooting him like in the head while he was down on the ground. But I guess they thought that was too brutal. Like, I guess it's too brutal to shoot a man when he's down or something. So Jim turns his back and
lets him stand
up. John jumps up like he's some kind of freaking superhero, like he's fine. And Jim turns around and shoots him 3 times, point blank, with a shotgun through the torso.
Yeah.
So, like, dude's dead.
And it quite literally ends there. Like, the guy falls down, Jim turns around and leans forward on the hood of the truck as the credits
smokes
start
a cigarette
rolling.
because he's a badass.
Yeah. It just kind of, suddenly from total wiener through the whole movie, he's a badass for the last 2 minutes, It's problematic. I think it comes across as a little over dramatic. Again, I don't feel like the movie really earned this moment, because it's trying to build up something, I think, between these two characters that never really sinks in, because we're flat out told that the bad guy doesn't have any motivation. Really, he's some dude from nowhere who apparently just likes killing people, who for no real good reason has latched onto this kid and decides that while he's killing all these people, he's going to kind of make this kid his project. Yet at the end of the day, he's really setting himself up to die anyway at the end. Like, he
just kind of gives up, or it seems like he does. I don't know.
I think it's
weird.
It's been suggested, I think, by people that this movie has some homoerotic overtones in it. I could kind of
see it.
I mean, it's there, but I'm not sure I'm going to give the writer enough credit to say that. No. There are moments. Of course, when he first gets into the car and he's staring at him, and it makes him uncomfortable, and he says some words, well, why are you looking at me like that? And he's just, I like looking at you, or something like that.
Yeah. There's even a gag, like they pull up to like a traffic stop, or I don't know, like there's been an accident or something. I don't remember what it was, but they pull up and some cop stops them, and Rutger Hauer, I think, is like pushing his gun into Jim's side, but it looks like he's getting fresh with them, and so the cop calls them lovebirds,
sweethearts,
or something like that.
Yeah.
So I can see it. and I don't know. I mean, there is Rutger Hauer, and I think that, this is just kind of typical of him. He has an intensity about him that is almost seductive.
Right.
I mean, he has those piercing eyes, and he's just so smooth and cool.
With that smile and that grin, just kind of very evil. Very, very, very over the top, smooth, creepy, evil.
And again, like, I feel so bad saying it because it's mean, but C. Michael Hall, or C. Thomas Howell. Who am I talking about? C. Michael Hall. That's the guy from like Breakfast Club. C. Thomas Howell. He's kind of got an effeminate thing about him.
He does.
And so I can see it. No, I don't think it was intentional. I don't think that's intentional subtext. But I could see how people could.
You can read it into the movie a lot.
Yeah,
the gun scenes under the table. The kid and the girl don't very clearly don't have sex or whatever, and their relationship is whatever. I don't know. Again, like I said, I just don't think that was probable. If it was the writer's original intent, it's very poorly written. It just yeah. So I mean, I think at the end of the day, for me, I had fonder memories of this movie than I kind of had after watching it the second time so many years later. It's not a bad movie.
No.
It just has these sort of core problems that made it really hard for me to recommend it as, oh my gosh, like that movie had an impact on me. At the end of the day, it was an interesting plot. Some stuff happened. It was exciting. It had good action scenes.
Yeah.
It was scary, and very good moments, especially if you can put yourself in the place of this guy and you could imagine this kind of thing happening to you. But the thematic core that kind of like settles and sits with you long after a movie is over, that these movies can often have, that's the thing that kind of grips and grabs, and I just didn't feel like it was there. So it's not a movie that I'm going to sit and think about long afterwards, so.
I know. I actually liked it. This was the first time I had seen it, or at least that I remember. So if I have seen it, it was when I was a kid, and I don't remember. But I liked it. I was entertained by it. But it was just, I was bothered the whole time. Why is he doing this? And how is he doing this?
Yeah.
Like, how is he always there? How is he always one step ahead? Like, I just don't get it. And I kind of kept expecting the movie to tell me at some point. Like, there was going to be some sort of connection. Like, maybe Rutger Hauer is his dad. Or, like, I don't know, something that would connect these guys other than just, oh, you happen to be the one rando guy who got away from me, so now I'm going to torment you forever. Until I eventually give up and allow myself to get captured. And that's the other thing too, like, he's so enigmatic. Like, the police don't even believe he exists for the whole movie, and then he basically just throws himself under the bus. Like, yep,
true.
it's me. Like, here I am. Now I'm depressed and I'm like suicidal in a truck. Like, I don't know.
That should have been like a real pivotal scene. That should have been like like that scene should have meant something. Here he is. He's set himself in the situation where he's finally surrounded by cops. He's giving himself up. There should have been something more meaningful about it, like something about killing this girl was a thing, or this confrontation, this moment with him in the truck was kind of a do or die kind of, somehow revealing something about him or his character or his motivations or, just a special turn in the movie. And it really wasn't. It's just another thing he did, and now he's captured. So
right,
yeah.
Well, and I also kind of feel like he shouldn't have died at the end. Like, he was so seemingly superhuman, really, throughout the whole rest of the movie. It felt a little bit cheap that
just get blasted point blank by shotgun.
Right, and then he's dead. Yeah, I don't know. They made a sequel. C. Thomas Howell was even in it, and I've never seen it, and I don't really know anything about it. I just read the synopsis, and it says he plays the same character. He plays Jim Halsey in the sequel. The sequel came out in 2003.
Oh God, it happens to him again.
Yes, like he and his fiance are like traveling cross country and they pick up a hitchhiker. Why? Like, and it's Jake Busey, which is hilarious.
Oh, geez.
But seriously, like, in the 80s, you were terrorized by a hitchhiker for an hour and 37 minutes, and then you're going to pick up another one later.
Well,
like, it doesn't even make any sense.
Yeah.
And they also remade it, and I have seen the remake, and it wasn't particularly memorable either. Like, I can't remember. I think what I do remember about it is that the guy and the girl were more of a team. Like, they were together a lot, and but it followed basically the same premise as I remember. It's been a long time since I've seen it, and I just happened to catch it on TV or something, and I sat and watched it. I mean, it had to have been all right, but
wow.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't. You're right. Like, it's kind of an oddity. I don't really know what to say about it. I don't know that I would necessarily recommend it. I enjoyed it, and Rutger Hauer is very scary. He wasn't even originally cast. Sam Elliott was cast in that role first, and apparently, like, he just blew everybody away with his audition, and they were just absolutely thrilled to have him. But then there was a scheduling conflict, and Rutger Hauer was second or even third choice, I think. But I do think that he's very good in it. He is very sinister. He's one of those few actors, who is sinister almost because they are charming and charismatic.
Yeah.
And he's played, Rutger Hauer has played vampires. He played, like I said, he was in Buffy the Vampire Slayer, which was goofy, and he totally was hamming it up in that movie, but it's fun. But he also played Dracula. Was it a Dario Argento Dracula? I don't know. It was
Dracula 3D. Yeah, I don't know.
And I didn't see it.
Well, he was in Dracula 3 Legacy in 2005. He actually played Van Helsing in Dracula 3D. I'm sorry.
Gotcha. But he does have kind of that vampire type thing where, like, it's sexy sinister.
Well,
and I mean that as a compliment. I think that I think he lived a long and full life and had a very successful career, and so it's sad that he's gone, but he certainly leaves a legacy. But he was a cool guy, and he's very charismatic on screen. And he's good. He does a good job in this movie. It may not be the greatest movie. It may be a little bit nonsensical, in fact. But he plays that sinister, quiet villain quite well.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned the vampire thing, because apparently, according to an interview that Anne Rice gave, he was her original vision for Lestat when she was writing the book. Crazy,
I can see
huh?
that.
Yeah, totally. So, yes, I agree with you. Go out and check out some of his other movies, especially if you haven't seen, like, Blade Runner or whatever. He still has like 5 projects that he's filmed that are still in post-production. So you'll be seeing him in a few more movies, even posthumously here. He's been on a couple television series lately, acting up to the very end. So really a go-getter, very well respected by pretty much everybody. It seemed just like a high-quality person, even though he could play that sinister, sweet villain role so well.
Yeah, he was charitable. He worked for all kinds of very noble causes. He was a cool guy.
Yeah. Well, thank you again for listening to another episode. If you enjoyed this podcast, please share it with a friend. You can find us on Facebook. Just search Two Guys and a Chainsaw, or you can find our website. It's twoguys.red40net.com. Just leave us a comment on either of those places. Tell us what you thought of this show, and also any requests that you might have. We have a short pile of them coming up, and so I think before long we'll be doing maybe a month more of requests coming up. So get those in. Until next time, I'm Todd.
And I'm Craig.
With Two Guys and a Chainsaw.